This is the video about possible topics that we'll read about in the latter part of the class once we vote on them. If you have other suggestions for things you're interested in, please let me know so I can sort of add them to the list. This is what the list looks like before class starts, but it can change. You'll notice I've divided it into personal identity and ethics. So the first sort of group are sort of directly focused on theories of personal identity or things related directly to personal identity. And then the second group is stuff that relates to the ethics of personal identity. It's going to depend on how the voting goes, but I think the plan is we'll try to cover some stuff from each um, category. Um, but yeah, a lot of this will just depend on what people's interests look like. I mean, if people like really want to do stuff from the second category and nothing from the first, I'll probably just say okay. What are these? Oh, and if you're interested in the specific readings we'd have for any of these, you can email me. I haven't put them up on Canvas because it's too many PDFs, but I have them. And this video is also optional. Like, if you think you know enough about the topics to make a choice, you don't have to sit through this. All right, personal identity, Buddhism. So that's pretty straightforward. We'd read some Buddhist views of personal identity or some descriptions of Buddhist views of personal identity. Buddhist views are typically classified as no self views, so they don't think there is such a thing as the self. Conventionalism is the view that personal identity is kind of merely a matter of convention. So it's just, it's a way we choose to talk about things that makes it the case that you are identical to yourself in certain situations. But we could change the way that we talk about things, and that would change the conditions of personal identity. So uh, that makes personal identity a relatively thin sort of thing. So there's a lot of similarity between conventionalism and no self views. And thus you can imagine some similarity between some Buddhist views and conventionalist views. So there's links there. Dead bodies. So here I am. Uh, if if personal identity exists, I am identical to myself. So I am Danny. Let's say uh, well, there's nothing heavy above me, but let's say there were something heavy above me and it falls and it hits me and I die. Now there would be a dead body sitting here in front of you. Is that me? Is that Danny? Um, I don't know. Good question. So the two main answers are yes or no. And so we'll look at those sorts of thoughts. Uh, Death. I've forgotten what death is about. Let's find out. Oh yeah. Sorry. So dead bodies is specifically about dead bodies. Like, is the body you? That's a specific problem for people who think we are bodies or think we are very close to bodies. So animalists who think we are animals. Animals are things with bodies. And then there are some people who think we're bodies, bodily theorists. But death is also a sort of interesting challenge for other sorts of views, because if you think we're not a body, or if you think we're not an animal, if you think, for instance, you have a psychological view or a certain sort of psychology, then what happens when you die? Well, you don't die because you don't exist when you're dead because you're a sort of psychology. But after death, there is no psychology. So then you don't exist when you die. You sort of pop out of existence. So the brick hits me on the head and Danny pops out of existence. And that, I don't know, maybe that's weird. So this is just some puzzles about death when it comes to personal identity. Fetuses. Similarly, for some theories of personal identity, you were never a fetus. Because if, for instance, we have a psychological theory of personal identity, um, or either you were never a fetus or maybe you were never an early fetus, maybe you were a late fetus. Because if you have, for instance, a psychological theory according to which personal identity depends on your psychology, when you were, 4 cells or something in a uterus, you had no psychology. You didn't even have a brain. So you didn't exist when you were conceived, which seems weird. You might have thought if at any point I existed, it was when I was conceived. That's when I came into existence. Who else was it if not me? That's a question. Narrativism is one of the theories of personal identity we'll read about in the class, and so this is just if you're interested in it, we'll read more about it, and especially in this, if we vote for this topic, we'd read at least a sort of famous objection to narrativism by Galen Strawson and then some other stuff. No self views say that you do not exist, so we'd read about those. Pretty straightforward. Parfit, we're going to read a lot about parfit in uh, the course, and so the parfit topic is just more about parfit. There's unlimited things we could read about, not unlimited, but there's lots of stuff we could read about parfit. He's got interesting views, and so we'll just read more of what he has to say and what other people have to say about what he has to say. And then phenomenology. This is about the link between phenomenology and personal identity. Phenomenology is the study of sort of what the contents of perception, or the necessary contents of perception, or the necessary structure of perception. So what it is to experience things, what it must be to experience things. And so the phenomenology of personal identity is sort of what is the relationship between being a being that has, being the sort of thing that has experiences, and being, a person. So that's phenomenology. And those are all the topics in the personal identity category so far. But if you have suggestions, let me know. The ethics topic, abortion. So as you might have gathered from the fetuses topic above, there's interesting intersections between theories of personal identity and the ethics of abortion. So if somebody does not exist until sometime after they're born, maybe that makes abortion more okay. If somebody exists from the moment they're born, maybe that makes abortion less okay, or maybe not. I don't know. So we'll read about that. At the other end of the sort of life spectrum are advanced directives. An advanced directive is something like it's like I think they're sometimes called living wills. It's like say, for instance, a piece of paper where you say to doctors, like, look, if something happens to me, I want certain things to be done. So for instance, if I fall into an irreversible coma, like my brain is damaged and so I'll never wake up or something, I don't want to be kept alive indefinitely. I want to just let me die or something, or don't resuscitate me if I'm in an irreversible coma or something like that. Or it doesn't have to be as far as an irreversible coma or something. You can, these are sort of, let's say you're going to have Alzheimer's or something, and you're going to lose a lot of mental faculties in the future. You write down what sort of medical treatment you want in the future, because you won't be capable of deciding that for yourself later. And some theories of personal identity say this sort of thing is questionable because you will change so much that you will no longer exist in the future if you fall into a coma or you have Alzheimer's or something, because these theories are sort of psychological theories and your psychology is just going to change so much that it'll be a different person. So then in that case, the advance directive is you saying, I want you not to resuscitate this other person. And that seems that seems not good. You can't say, hey doctors, I want you to let somebody else die. That would be objectionable. So this is the debate over whether advanced directives are okay, depending on different theories of personal identity. Prudence. Prudence is what's good for you. So being prudent is doing what's best for yourself. And as you can imagine, that links to personal identity, because who is yourself? Who are you? Who is this person that you're doing good things for? Well, that depends on your theory of personal identity. So there turns out to be a lot to say about the link between prudence on the one hand and personal identity on the other. And so we'll look at that. Responsibility. So on the syllabus, it's listed responsibility. I also put in parentheses here, punishment. So let's say you commit some sort of terrible crime, and then you your brain gets transplanted into somebody else and their brain gets transplanted into you. Who should go to jail? Is it your body with the new brain, or your brain in the new body? What if we wiped your brain before we put it in the new body, and now the new body doesn't remember the crime, the old body doesn't remember the crime? Should anybody go to jail? What's going to happen? So that's just one puzzle. There's actually lots and lots of weird puzzles about personal identity and responsibility. I put it in terms of going to jail. I shouldn't have, because that's kind of a separate question, and that's the punishment thing in brackets, in parentheses. We can also read about punishment specifically. So, in fact, here's the weirdest case. You commit a crime and then you divide into two identical people. Should they both go to jail? Let's say you should go to jail for 5 years. Should they both go to jail for 5 years? Or maybe they should both go to jail for 2.5 years, because that adds up to 5. That's weird. So I don't know. Those will probably be two separate topics, but of course they're related, because the only reason you ever punish somebody is because they're responsible. Well, not the only reason. Sorry, that Lots of people disagree, but in this class, we'd mostly be looking at responsibility-based punishment. Split personality. Uh, what's going on with that? Especially from the ethical point of view, let's say you can like cure somebody's split personality and like turn them into one person. Are you like killing somebody because you went from two personalities to one, or from three personalities to one? You're committing two murders. What's going on there? And then that's not the only ethical question. In fact, I'm not even sure if we'll talk about that one specifically, but there's lots of ethical questions related to split personality and personal identity. And finally, what we owe to future selves. The we what this is similar to prudence for reasons that'll become clear if we talk about this. Let me look at the. Um, I actually don't have any articles for this prepared, but this is let's say you'll be different in the future in ways, in certain ways. Does this change how much you should care about that person? And if so, sort of what duties do you have to that person? Different theories of personal identity may have different thoughts on this topic. If it's not going to be you in the future, why should you care so much about what's going to happen to them? If you can make a choice now to just live it up and take a bunch of drugs and have a lot of fun, that's going to really suck 40 years from now. But that's not really going to be you 40 years from now. Why not live it up? Um, so yeah. So those are all the existing topics. And again, if you have suggestions, please let me know.